growing up in the 2000s, few experiences matched the pure euphoria of doing one of two things. Either a successful double bounce on a trampoline, or and you know, if I had space in my apartment for a trampoline, I'd probably say both of these things still hold true. But if playing so many games over the years has taught me anything, it's how a video game begins. And usually, it looks something like this. And for the longest time, I've never thought twice about it. I've always just thought, yep, a game's gotta start in fields and meadows. After that, you can add snow and shit. But then, I questioned why. Why do video games all start the same? What if I don't want to touch some grass? How did this become a stereotype for video games? I don't know, is it something modern games should keep doing? Or is it an idea we need to retire? God, everything's gonna be so introspective with that guy. Shut up! Everything's gonna be fine. Just kick back, take in the great fake outdoors, and let's explore one of the most overlooked locations that appears in almost every video game. I never really questioned it before, but it's a bit bland out here, isn't it? But what should I model?
Build a house, you stupid prick.
Great idea, Punkwin, and thanks
Lucky me, I've got a hot air balloon.
And thanks to Skillshare, the sponsor of this video, we'll get this place spiced up in no time. Ever heard of Skillshare, you grumpy old penguin?
Yes.
Oh, because if you said no, I was going to say how it's the largest online learning community for creatives with, I kid you not, thousands of classes led by industry experts, regardless if it's film, design, illustration, animation, productivity, or something else. Skillshare can help you elevate your hobby into a career, or keep it as a hobby, but become really, really good. We're into 2025, and while you might think of the start of a year as a time to be focusing on your health and well-being, you shouldn't forget about exercising your creative skills too. Because trust me when I say, if you stop practicing a specific creative skill, you will rapidly lose progress if you don't practice. Maybe for you, Skillshare's the chance to get back into photography, or finally a gateway to starting a DIY project you've always dreamt of.
I'm training to be a voice actor.
But for me, that's continuing to develop my skills in 3D, ensuring that I always keep improving. And right now, if you couldn't tell, I struggle quite a bit with 3D environments. So finding the Skillshare original class, Interior Design with Blender by Derek Elliott, is the perfect jumping off point to get me some XP in environment design.
Where's the lamb sauce?
Gordon Ramsay?
James Corden, actually.
So, what skill are you gonna start training? Join Skillshare today, and the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Thanks again, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. Now, before anything else, I think the first thing we've got to figure out is why? Why would you want to use a location like this at the beginning of a game compared to anything else? Turns out there's a lot of good reasoning behind it, and the easiest way to explain it all is with a little something called semiotics. In short, semiotics is the study of how we attach meaning to, well, things. It's how signs are interpreted by you, me, or even animals, and how everything from words to images to gestures and sounds are used to convey meaning. Yeah, pretty philosophical, I know. Now, semiotics can be broken up into 3 types. First is icons. An icon is the most basic semiotic. It's a signal that looks exactly like what it represents. The rolling green hills and bright blue skies in video games directly resemble their real-world counterparts. These are places where not only can you see in every direction, but have the freedom to go in any direction, which is a great first impression to give a player. The next semiotic is index. Now, unlike an icon, which looks like what it represents, an index is a sign that points to its meaning through association and experience, which is basically a really wordy way of saying that smoke doesn't look like fire, but it indicates that there is a fire. And if you've played more than a couple video games, grassy fields indicate an early game location. The grass plains function as a blank canvas for gameplay, which makes them an ideal playground since obstacles early on are designed more to teach the player than to immediately challenge them. It makes this level theme the perfect tutorial or hub location. Players can move freely, experiment, and naturally learn how the game works without large threats which they might not be prepared for just yet. So grassy fields aren't just a trope, they're one of the most effective teaching tools in game design. Symbols? Symbols. Okay. Unlike icons, which resemble what they represent, or indices, which indicate meaning through repetition, symbols are entirely learned. Their meanings have zero natural connection on their own, but instead, we understand them through language, culture, and storytelling. You weren't born knowing what a stop sign was, you needed Jack Black and Elmo to learn that shit.
This chicken tracker is an ender pearl.
This shit isn't fucking funny.
And with so many stories famously following the hero's journey storytelling structure, it really doesn't matter whether it's a movie, book, or video game, a narrative that starts you off leaving a village and entering some grassy plains is textbook 101. Even if you've never lived in the countryside, chances are, when you think of the start of a journey, you still picture something like this. Because stories, culture, and media have trained us our entire lives to. It's a goddamn propaganda, I tell you. They want you to play Xenoblade. So grassy fields in video games aren't just there to look nice or because they're useful for tutorials. They exist because for literal generations, we've been taught to see this biome as the beginning of a larger adventure. So if it's so important, why is it so overlooked? Is it from oversaturation? I feel like there's just as much deserts in video games as there is with grass fields, but you don't hear gamers complaining that games need to, quote, stop the sand. Well, it might be because grass plains are just that, plain. If the environment isn't doing anything interesting, why would it be memorable? Well, a good design rule to follow, which I think can be applied to any form of art, is that the more intuitive and accessible something is, there comes a sacrifice in personality. For example, here's me as can be. But if I designed a character to be more accessible, all of a sudden, this isn't just me, but it can be you. You can relate to this guy. But in taking away the elements that make me, it makes things a little harder to identify. The more accessible something is, usually the less personality it has. And I feel like that perfectly encapsulates the first level aesthetic. More players can relate to it, but less players are going to be ecstatic about it. Game design often relies on clear, intuitive environments, especially early on. So with being such an approachable location, grassy plains are a natural choice for a game's first area. But a game's first area isn't just about the purpose it serves, it's about the feeling it invokes. The colors, the music, the atmosphere all shape the player's first impressions. You can guard the player's emotion and expectations just with a hex code. Green tones naturally evoke feelings of peace, growth, and safety, whilst blue tones convey calmness, freedom, and trust. Music theory also has its place in starting areas. Themes for grassy plains are often in major keys, giving an uplifting and positive feeling to a track. And just compare that to the polar opposite design choices. A dark industrial location with oppressive colors and aggressive music is often used in fortress levels, late game dungeons, or industrial sci-fi settings to give a sense of intensity. And on the topic of comparison, how do different genres use this level theme? No matter if it's a fighting game, a racing game, or a platformer, whatever genre the game is can completely change the purpose of this biome. Survival crafting games like Minecraft or Terraria often spawn you in plains with lots of trees visible from the get-go, as wood is the most valuable resource at the start of a game. Or take the obvious example of Breath of the Wild. The Great Plateau gives you a high vantage point, but Hyrule Field gives you visibility in every direction, both being sprinkled with rubble of a broken kingdom, which when the game's thesis is to explore an adventure, these meadows with little sprinkles of curiosity is the antithesis of the game's identity. RPGs like Pokemon start you off in a cozy route with Pokemon resembling birds, bugs, small mammals, and fauna you'd expect to find in nearby woodlands close to where you grew up. Or just look at Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Wonder is set in the Flower Kingdom, slightly offshore from the Mushroom Kingdom. Having valleys of blue flowers in the background keeps the color palette of plains like we talked about, but still gives it some freshness by reminding you that this isn't the Mushroom Kingdom you're used to. Even if your game is set somewhere completely unrealistic, having your first location feel at least somewhat familiar for players can really go a long way in helping immerse them in the world. But something really cool which comes out of these generic level designs is a way it can act as a control variable to contrast the unique variety of design choices made throughout the rest of the game. Kind of like a leitmotif, but not for music. It's pretty important to have something like this to reference back in your game, because then you can use that reference to satisfy or subvert the expectations of a player later in the game. A later location in the game might even call back to that earlier area to give you a moment to reflect on your journey and just see how far you've come. But of course, as the video game industry has exploded, with more and more of us playing games for X amount of years of our lives, developers have started playing with this expectation. Some games might assume you've already been playing video games for a long time already, and so often be more playful with the environment they start you in. If we're honest with ourselves, I don't think Undertale would benefit from starting you off in a peaceful grassy field. Going against the grain and defying expectations can seriously go a long way in forming a memorable identity and first impression for your video game. At first glance, grassy plains might seem like the most generic way you could ever start a video game. And although that could be true, they're also one of the most effective. They're relatable, they're approachable, and they set the tone for the adventure ahead. Whether a game leans into this trope or completely flips the script, its opening location tells you everything you need to know about the journey you're about to take.